Hello? Hello? I'm Tanid, and welcome to the Scrimlow... Hi there. Sorry to interrupt my own thing, but, so this has been on my mind lately. How many of you have, played an old game recently? Yeah? How many of you have played this via either emulation or through a officially sanctioned sort of update or port? Yeah? Yeah? And how many of you playing the games through these methods have used emulation tools to make your experience better? Like save points or possibly rewind? Yeah? Yeah? That's a lot of people. Normal to do that, actually. So why does it feel weird to admit it?
Welcome to Intermission.
Can I be honest? Booting up Alex Kidd in the Miracle World for the Master System, didn't predict in advance it would give me an existential crisis about doing any of this, but as you'll come to learn on this show, common to get the existential, metatextual thinking about thinking. Or just thinking about making content and then making content about making content. Here we are. I just get existential a lot. I just think it's a problem. So I was doing a big think about the game I just played, Alex Kidd, minding my own business. It's a game I replay more than I would assume, actually. I think this is probably like my third playthrough of it for this little thing. Getting the footage for the background and that. And I have opinions on this game, and those opinions are quite positive. But forbidden. Forbidden of me to think this with my mind, because it kind of goes against the common views about this game. Even to this day, like, if you make an editorial stuff, you have to... Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. In this game, basically, it has a sense of humor, which is kind of really charming, and that, at the end of some stages, you're challenged to, like, a rock, paper, scissors fight against, like, a physical embodiment of rock, paper, or scissors. Like, they have hands for a head in the position of the thing. And you just have to play rock, paper, scissors with them. The AI isn't random. It has a preset amount of choices. But if you don't know them, then it does feel random. And then you could just, like, be halfway through the entire game and then choose wrong and then eat shit, game over, you gotta start again. And, obviously that's bad. That's, like, funny, but also, right? But here's the thing, I can rewind and use save states. It's not a problem. And for my personal playthrough, it stays funny because of this, right? And yet, most, like, editorials or little write-ups about this game, you have to, like, are almost, like, obligated to stay in a static. What I mean by that is, like, you have to play as if you're playing literally on a Master System in 1987. Yeah, so it has to be bad, and you have to have not a positive experience with this game, even though pretty much everyone playing it in a modern context will have access to tools to mitigate this problem. And since recording this, I've recorded all that without having played the Sega Ages port, and apparently Rewind is just both Rewind and a cheat sheet in the border and the background is built into this thing. So how this sort of manifests is that I just feel like no matter how many, like, write-ups or little recording things with this I did about this game, I just feel like I had to put it out there that, like, oh yeah, and these things weren't a problem because I was using emulation tools to mitigate the problem. And that's kind of what sent me into this line of thinking of just, like, it's weird we have to disclose that, almost like I'm putting myself on the martyr. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, flatulating myself for crimes against gamer. And, like, that's both weird, and it's weird that we've normalized this. Like, I don't feel like I was weird for thinking that I had to do that, or that there was this voice in the back of my head saying it was something I just had to intentionally disclose. Because, like, the reality is that in the time that Alex Kidd and the Miracle World has existed, we are coming up to a point where it's probably more normal to have these tools available to circumvent the Jakin sections then the game has existed where you have to suffer through it normally. Like the random chance and just the game might just tell you to eat shit. And under that context, like, it is weird. It's weird that, like, the use of emulation tools isn't assumed rather than it is, like, an exception. Because what other medium is like this? Like, if someone was doing, like, I'm watching all the Universal Monster films, for example, it's like a review thing on YouTube. Do they have to disclose, like, now, I watched an upscaled version for my television? Or is it just, like, one, you don't care, because I don't fucking care. Two, like, duh. That's, like, the most readily available version. Like, yeah, that's probably how you watched it. Yet, in games, this is, like, sacrilegious. This applies to, like, another game that I fucking absolutely love. Dark Void. Like a PS3 Capcom game where man has jetpack. That's kind of it. That's the premise. Gosh, it's fun. It's fun to be a man in a jetpack. But that might raise some eyebrows with some of you out there. Just like, what do you mean you like that game? Everyone hates that thing, or liking it is like the divergent opinion rather than like a normal one. And let me tell you why that is. It's because once upon a time, this game cost 40 quid at retail when it first came out, and when the reviews, aka the current coded opinion of the game, was out. But I didn't pay 40 quid for this. This was like a few months later, and it had already gone down to like a $5. And if you want to play the game now, it's only available on Steam, also for a $5, and that's if it's not on sale. Yeah. So in that context, when I think of Dark Void, is it a good game for a $5? Like, does it provide a good experience for the value of a $5? Like, yeah, it kind of goes above and beyond a game that costs a $5. Quite frankly, I bought like Garden Story recently on Steam for like a tenner, and does that have a full 3D man in the jetpack? No. But of course, we have this weird sense of like obligation to treat our opinions of the game like as if it just came out 2 minutes ago, even now in 2023 when the Dark Void isn't 40 quid, it's a $5 on Steam. And there's this weird sort of like sense of your opinions have to reflect that. They can't reflect the context in which you can literally only play the game in. And the context in which the codified opinion exists in wasn't around for like, it didn't last 4 months. You know, maybe that's an exaggeration, but I remember it not being long before I got my copy, and it was like dead cheap. Yeah. And that's just the thing with like the capital G gamers in general. It's like, once there is a codified community opinion on something, that opinion, even decades later, can't be moved. Another thing that's not an example yet, but it's gonna be as time moves on. Y'all remember Sonic 06? Do you know who won't? Your kids or your grandkids, because they'll remember Project 06. And think about that. There's going to be a world where the opinion was like, oh, that's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun Sonic game. I liked it when I played it, because this will be the version that will survive for years. Like, it's not even the full version isn't out, but let's think about like through 4 decades from now. At that point, it will surpass the original game as being like the most readily available version. So when you talk about that game, that there's going to be a point in history where the good one will be assumed rather than the original. And this feels like a tangent, but like it does circle back to Alex Kidd. I had a really positive time, and those positive opinions are based on the most common way you would engage or play this game. I'm going to be generous, okay? Because I remember Master System games, at least in my neck of the woods, in old Turf Island, being sort of available into the mid-2000s. Like, not uncommon to go to a resale shop and see like Master System games plastered on the wall. But then at no point after that, I say like around late 2000s, again into the 2010s, is when that stopped being like a common appearance. So let's be generous and say 2008 is when the experience of just being able to walk into town and just be like, I'm going to buy a Master System and Alex Kidd, meaning that's like the core version that you'd play. And this isn't even taken into account like Master System 2s, which had the game on the system like itself. Actually, let's say 2007, just to make it easier math for me. So that's 20 years of somewhat accessible playing Alex Kidd in its original intended context of playing it on a Master System. Let's also say with a CRT, let's say playing it on a flat screen is a distortion of intent, if we're going that far. In that case, by the year 2028, that's 5 years away, Alex Kidd would have existed with the context of emulation tools longer than it has without. So when I say I really loved Alex Kidd, it was really fun, and I didn't have a problem with being it, really. It was just like a 1-2 hour thing that I just pop on every now and then, play from start to finish. Me using rewinds while I'm playing should, it should be assumed. It shouldn't be assumed, because, no zoomer is going to suffer that, unless they're really dedicated to, like, artistic intent, in which case, you better save that for more poignant games than Alex Kidd in Miracle World, if I'm being brutally honest about it. What's the artistic poignance of Alex Kidd in Miracle World that would require you to play it without tools? Like, Goku can birth any Scrimblow if you put your mind to it. So, like, I used to put these, like, disclaimers in front of these videos about, like, these are tool assisted. They'll be, like, in the game capture footage in the background. If it's like on the original system, I'll be using like rewinds, as you're seeing with this right now, and the last boy Wonder Boy video, last video with Wonder Boy and Iki. You saw that. Fuck it, I'm just not gonna do it anymore. Like it should be assumed. It should be assumed that I'm gonna do that. If you need like declaration of personal stop off point, I'd say like anything before like PlayStation, Nintendo 64, sort of like console era, so that we don't have access to rewind with those consoles. But like, I feel like games were at a point in my personal tolerance that I'm like, don't really use them. But for someone else, they might. And again, that should be assumed. It's normal. It's normal. And the older these consoles get, the more normal it will be, because as devices get more powerful, as emulation gets easier, because it's normal to use these tools to like make old games accessible. It should really be more of a declaration if you didn't, like, or you should need to disclose if you didn't, like. And now with that almost 30-minute disclaimer out the way, now I feel comfortable giving thoughts, speak on thing. It's so hot here. Anyway, a 3, a 2, a 1, and boop. Whoa, thank you for that, Sebastian. Yes, there was scrim time. So yes, user of cheating, user of cheats. Fuck, that bastard took most of my talking points. Fuck. Okay, so basic rundown of what an Alex Kidd even is. Like I said in my Wonder Boy video, this was a weird time for Sega. Suddenly having a scrimb was sort of like seen as a killer app of a console, and they just assumed things would be like normal in the post Mario world, and I guess it wasn't. They had Wonder Boy, but that had a weird licensing goo, which just means that it wasn't really a Sega exclusive, even if it didn't have the Wonder Boy name. They needed a true scrimb. Meanwhile, a licensed Dragon Ball title sort of fell to shit, but they kind of halfway made it anyway. Put two problems together, and that's a solution, friends. So here we are. Goku became Alex Kidd. The Dragon Ball world became Raxasandia, which is a world from a previous Master System game. Just feels like they kind of threw a dartboard at their release schedule, and they're like, that's where it takes place. Because just looking it up, Raxandia is in planet Ares, and the guy you rescue in the castle halfway through this game is the protagonist of Master System game Pit-Pot, which I'm sure we'll look at some point. Do you see what I mean? Just feels like that'll do. The one joke from Dragon Ball with Goku poking people in the eye is now a central mechanic with like the Jaken brothers. They're not Capsule Corp houses, they just live in orbs, normal, and you just get devices from the shops and put them in hammer space. Doesn't need to be explained. Do you ask that of Bugs Bunny? Yeah, this is very blatantly like, but hey, it did give us a nice, cool little scrimp. But then to really position this as like, oh, this is our Mario is wild. This is clearly something not intended by the dev team, but was just sort of ramped up by marketing to solve their lack of scrimp problem. And this isn't by far his only game. We'll get to Alex's worth as a scrimp as we continue on with these games. But gosh, like Master System as a system, like I just love the colors. Everything's just so vibrant and pops out. It's just such a different vibe to like other 8-bit consoles of the time. I love that his main attack is just the fist as large as himself. It's just it's such a wild thing. I really enjoy the not Capsule Corp capsules mechanics of item systems in this game. They're not useful. They're just there. There's one item which like sort of spawns mini Alexes to attack everything in front of you, which like the only use I've ever found of it is in the 2 castle levels where you can just like set them off down some stairs. It's so silly and useless, but it almost becomes like a challenge on repeat playthroughs of just like, no, I've got to use these, like these have got to like come in handy. They will not, but my god, if it's not fun to force usefulness out of them, you know. Sometimes there's just a real unexplainable flow to the most like computer games of just like there's breakable blocks everywhere. There's just orbs instead of like coming up with any diegetic explanation for like the level design. Sometimes in like just this modern era of just like 1 million hour games going from 1 million hour RPG to the next, just sometimes you just crave that simplicity, that sort of no thoughtedness of just your little guys going, which is wild to kind of say because that wouldn't have been the original like intent of the piece at the time. Like this would have been like the big home console thing, you know. Not really in that same era of like pre-Mario, pre-Zelda, where like games were just like a really elaborate toy, like time waster thing, like arcade conversion device. This would have been like no, it's different now. We can make bigger games that are like meaningful for the home market. Yeah, in 2023, it's like that deviation and distraction from the home market of games that kind of is where these retro games have their niche, which is kind of funny to think about. One day, your favorite Like a Dragon game will just be the time waster on your phone to distract from even bigger home console stuff. Think about it and feel old.